For more on this, let's bring in Weijia Jiang from the White House. So Weijia, several immigration advocates have said these orders lack the power to make swift and substantial changes. What more are you hearing they want to see done by the president?
Well, for example, with regard to reuniting those families, advocates say, they shouldn't have to wait for a task force to form and then review how to do this, that more action should be taken swiftly. But as you heard just in the piece there was that acting director of ICE under former President Obama, who said it's really not that simple because linking these parents back up to children will take time, and they'll have to hash out a plan to try not only to reunite them, but first to track them down. And then for the other orders, the language is very specific. It says review. And so some advocates are saying, why not just reverse the remain in Mexico policy, for example, that requires asylum seekers to wait somewhere other than the U.S. as their applications are processed. And you just heard from the White House press secretary who said, we can't just wave a wand and turn these things around. We have to look at what has happened under the Trump administration so they know exactly how to reverse it. And aside from that, the president is receiving criticism also for the role that he played under the Obama administration as vice president. In fact, one advocate said that, he had a role to play in years of policies that left thousands of families separated through deportations and detentions. I had a Trump advisor text me this morning that said, it was Biden who built the cages. So, he does have some baggage left over from when he was vice president, because you'll remember under the Obama administration, they did deport a record number of migrants.
That is true. Well, you know what? I don't want to sort of go over some of the finer points of the differences, but we do know that one of the key things that the Trump administration did is sort of criminalize crossing the border, which left people with very few options and many more people finding themselves being deported rather than being able to apply for asylum. But, the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, said that family reunification was an area that was of interest to her. What's her role? What is her involvement?
So the First Lady's office says she's not going to have an official role with that task force to bring these families back together, but she does plan to use her platform to highlight its work, because she has a long history of working with migrants at the border, especially with children. So we know that this is one of several of the policy areas that she will likely have a hand in. Of course, she is still very new to becoming the First Lady. She is also working as a teacher. And so, it's going to take some time to really try to shape what her signature platform is going to be. But again, her office says she is going to at least try to emphasize all the work being done at the border.
Weijia, the Senate cleared a procedural hurdle on the road to passing President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief proposal yesterday by voting to pass a motion to proceed to debate over the budget resolution. So the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, joined the president and Democratic senators to discuss the Republicans' COVID-19 relief counteroffer. So what came out of this meeting, and how long could it be before Americans start to receive some money?
So according to sources on Capitol Hill, this was a meeting during which President Biden basically said what the Republicans offered him the night before just wasn't enough. And even though he is open to hearing about potential ways to compromise, he has vowed not to forget the middle class and the, in his words, nurse and pipe fitter who might have jobs but are still struggling to make ends meet. And so what we will see is more of this sort of backdoor and front door negotiation playing out to the extent that's possible, even though, there's a lot of things to consider here, including whether Democrats really are going to have that majority that they are banking on to use the process that doesn't require any Republican support, because Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia has made clear he does not agree with increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And yesterday, during the press briefing, the press secretary said she wasn't going to weigh in on whether that was negotiable or not. Added to President Biden's schedule was 2 conversations with congressional Democrats. These talks continue. We know that they want to get something done before the current unemployment benefits run out in the middle of next month. So we just have to wait to see how rapidly they want to proceed, while again trying to at least maintain some show of an effort to work with Republicans.
And so what about this endeavor to ramp up vaccinations? The Biden administration announced that they'll be shipping out more COVID-19 vaccines and sending them out to retail pharmacies, which seems pretty good, particularly in areas where there are more vulnerable people. Walk us through how this plan is going to be achieved.
So we did hear from the response team about this yesterday, in particular the head of the response team, Jeff Zients, who basically said it's going to take some time to figure this all out, but initially they plan to send 1 million doses of the vaccine to about 6,500 pharmacies around the country. What we don't know yet is how they're going to choose those pharmacies and exactly how many doses each one is going to get, because he also mentioned that they are trying to target more communities that have vulnerable populations. And again, they are committed to equity as they try to figure out ways to make sure minority communities have the same opportunities to become vaccinated. And so they're also, still studying exactly what pharmacies will best do that. The other problem here, though, is supply. I mean, there's, a million doses is not a lot when you're spreading it around to so many pharmacies. So they are trying to ramp that up to see how much more they can provide pharmacies. What we do know is that they also announced they are increasing the amount of doses each state is going to get from 10 million to 10.5 million every week. So there is progress, and one key to making more progress is that they're so far very clear about saying we don't have enough and we need more, and we recognize this is a problem. So in order to fix the problem, you have to say it is a problem first, and that's exactly what we keep hearing, not only from the response team but from President Biden.
Yeah, and as Anne-Marie pointed out, Weijia, part of fixing that problem is passing this COVID relief bill. And, you're going to hear Republicans like Mitch McConnell saying, Democrats don't want to play ball. The Democrats are preaching unity, but they're not being unifying by trying to push this with reconciliation. We should just remind people that Mitch McConnell was saying or speaking a very different tune back in 2017 when Republicans wanted to pass that huge tax cut, which many economists, including the former Labor Secretary Robert Reich, have said essentially benefited the super wealthy and corporations. Republicans did what they had to do. Democrats weren't on board with that. That's the business of Washington. But this has real life implications because people are dying, and people need that relief because of the way the economy has been left in shambles due to the pandemic. So that's where this all plays out in live TV for everybody to see. But let me ask you now about, I want to switch gears here a little bit, the former president, Donald Trump. His attorneys in his upcoming impeachment trial, they released a brief yesterday, and they're previewing their arguments for next week's trial. How is the former president defending himself against the charge of incitement of insurrection? Is he directly addressing that charge, or is he trying to misdirect and talk about something else?
Yeah, so this argument is really going to focus, it seems, on 2 main points, and that is one of them. In fact, one of his lawyers, Bruce Castor, did an interview with our affiliate in Philadelphia, KYW Radio, and he said just because somebody gave a speech and people got excited, it doesn't mean it's the speech maker's fault. It's the people who got excited and did what they know is wrong. Of course, that's debatable. The other part of this is whether Congress can impeach someone who is no longer a sitting president. The lawyers will argue that the answer is no, that basically, you cannot remove a private citizen from an office that they no longer hold. But Democrats are saying, he was this action that is in question happened when he was still president. And so I think you're going to see a lot of arguments from both sides trying to interpret the Constitution. What is really interesting is something else they mentioned in this brief about the president's comments regarding election fraud. And so basically they're saying, the average person can't really know whether the president was accurate or not, and therefore you can't say that his claims are false. So even Republicans have said you just need to back away from these claims, these baseless claims that kind of got you into this place in the first place. But it is interesting that this line was in there about about what the former president said and continues to say now that he's out of office. So we'll have to see whether they actually make that point, when the trial begins next week.
It sounds like one of those, can you prove a negative? So you can't prove there was widespread fraud, but can't you prove there wasn't? Yes, we can prove that there wasn't widespread fraud.
I was going to say, yeah, they can. Because everyone...
There's actually a lack of evidence.
That has been answered.
To show. Yes.
You got to laugh. Weijia, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.